的这样的一个演讲哈，相信对于我们家庭财富的不管是治理还是传承来讲，如何树立一个优秀的品牌以及提升我们企业的美誉度是相当的重要的。那过后如果大家感兴趣的话，也可以和我们张女士多多的交流。那么接下来是我们今天上午的最后的一个演讲，也相信是大家最关心的一个话题，那就是健康。身体健康与情绪健康的养生之道。那么下面我们一位演讲嘉宾呢是毕业于宾夕法尼亚大学沃顿商学院全家康的创始人 CEO Faisal Ali先生。那 Faisal Ali先生呢曾被诊断为是癌症3期的，经过了我们的健康的养生之道呢，最终实现了完全的健康。那现在由我们 Faisal Ali先生我们带来家族健康与情绪管理。Please welcome the founder of CEO of
Everybody hear me? Is the mic okay? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to first thank Tiffany and FOTT for giving me the opportunity to be here today and taking the time to translate the article that I wrote, and it's now available in the magazine that you have with you. So to begin, I want to thank you for something that I cannot give back to you, and that is your time. And taking a reflection on that, I want to touch back on what Jeremiah yesterday hit on, where he explained that his mother, who's now 95, but at the age of 93, won one of the most prestigious awards that she's ever received. And she's now working with some of the top designers in the world. So I want you to reflect back and think to yourself that, how have I got here today? And when I look at that, I'm asking you to look at, okay, how am I doing medically in terms of how I got here today? And let's look at the fundamentals. How am I eating? How am I drinking? How am I moving? What is the quality and quantity of my sleep? What are the thoughts that are going through my mind? And what is my emotional state? And then taking on to some of the discussions that Alan also had, talking about relational well-being. What is the relationship with myself? What is my relationship with my family? And what is the relationship with the community or the company at large? And just reflect on that in terms of how I got here and how am I doing in all those elements today. And then project yourself forward to the age of 95. How are you doing? Is it something that you're going to be proud of? Are you going to be able to continue doing what you love doing and be able to win that award or prize in whatever form? It doesn't have to be like her, internationally recognized. It could be just you versus you. So I want to take you back to a story of how I got here today, just to tell you how things can get a little messy. So I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Chinese it's Zaire. I was raised in Belgium, finished my schooling in Canada, went to university in the US, worked as an investment banker for a couple of years, and moved to Hong Kong in 1992. Our core business, which we started at the age of 23, is my brother, myself, and my cousin, was in Eastern Europe. So we went into Hungary, Czech, Poland, Romania, Ukraine in 1991 with our own brand of clothing, and then eventually became the largest licensee to Disney and Warner Brothers. On the other side, we specialized in war-torn Africa, countries that I don't think many of you want to go to, Angola, Congo, Sudan, Burundi, all specialized in civil war countries. And there we brought what we considered our mission to bring to the third world what the first world takes for granted. So fast-moving consumer goods, Procter & Gamble, Gillette, Wrigley's, Mars, Ferrero Rocher, from China, the Haier Group for electronic consumer goods, and then generic pharma. So by the age of 35, operating in 15 countries with 10,000 employees, a business in the hundreds of millions, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. So I went from the peak of my performance to being told that I might drop dead. My kids were 1 and 3. It wasn't something that I was looking forward to. Now I pray to God none of you have to go through this, but I want you to reflect on the things that I had to do and see whether or not you would be in position to do those. So the first thing, obviously, they told me was that if you don't give 100%, it's game over. Which means 100% to deal with the situation I was in. So the first thing I had to do was hand over my company. The company, I was the top CEO, I had a bunch of partnerships in various countries. My handover was less than 5 minutes. And when I say 5 minutes, I'm actually being very polite. I told my team that I travel 6 months of the year, I don't run the company day to day, The 1-year plan is done. The 5-year is done, which obviously today is irrelevant. And I'm no longer active CEO. Anything you tell me is at the risk of being fired. 11 months, 0 decision making, 0 reporting, nothing. The second thing I did was make a phone call to my lawyer in Switzerland to inform him of my situation and to make sure that the house is in order. And when I mean the house is in order, I had created a foundation at the age of 27 for my family so that if, God forbid, something were to happen, I would not have to scramble. And I had the conversation with the lawyer. The lawyer said, look, the house is in order. You and I both know this is not going where the doctors think it's going, but let's see what happens. Then he spoke to my spouse, told her to focus on me and not to worry about anything else because the house is in order. So a handover in less than 5 minutes and 1 phone call. Now, of course, based on the statistics I was given, I had to have the conversation with my spouse who was from Pakistan, and we negotiated that the kids would be raised in Dubai, not in Pakistan. I also talked about remarriage. I bought a very beautiful home for them in Dubai in preparation if things went sideways. Now, are you in position to do those things? Or are you ready? Maybe more prepared than I am. I then, of course, had to deal with 20 rounds of chemo. Unlike most people who have surgery first and then chemo or radiation afterwards, I actually had to what they call debulk. I had 10 tumors in my body. The largest was the size of a Rubik's Cube in the back of my chest. I had a tennis ball in my neck, and I had 8 in my lungs. Now you must be thinking, wow, you must have had a really screwed up time between 23 and 35. Well, let me tell you otherwise. I was pretty much the same size, maybe 3 kilos plus minus. I did travel 6 months of the year, and I'm sure there's a lot of you in the room that do the same. Yes, the countries I went to, I'm sure, are a lot more brutal than yours. But when I was in Hong Kong, I worked out. I ate home food. Even food was delivered to my office. When I traveled, yes, I did not work out, and I ate whatever was available, but trust me, I'm spoiled, so I did eat quite well. Now, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't even drink coffee or tea, so I'm really boring. So what happened? Now let's look at, again, the elements I told you to consider. What was the quantity and quality of my sleep? Questionable. What was my mental state? To give you an example, many years later, when obviously I recovered and I started to write my book, which I've just finished, my spouse at the time said, you know, I would be sitting at dinner, one-on-one in a restaurant, and ask you a question, and you would respond, huh? And then I would ask again, and you would respond, huh, again. And then obviously she would retract. So how present are we with our loved ones? Or maybe with our family, or at the company? And then when I talk about, so that's all the mental noise that was going on with all the thoughts of all these funny countries I was operating in, and the fact that I thought, you know, I was the big cheese. Then we talk about emotional, right? She told me many years later, you know, I loved you, but I didn't want to be around you. You were always very aggressive. You were always very angry. You were always very forceful. And here I was thinking, oh, I want to have the best seat in the restaurant. I want to have the best seat on the airplane. I want to be able to go to the best resort and have the most incredible experience. But the way I showed up emotionally was actually insulting to my loved ones. They were actually not wanting to be with me. And then when it came to the relational well-being, well, you can just figure what happened, right? So just to tell you that even though I was physically fine, all these parameters were not. And then when we start looking at the next stage is you say, okay, so maybe it's genetics. Well, I've had my DNA test for genetic predisposition to cancer, and guess what? 0. So it's 50% nature and 50% nurture. So I created my own disease. Now I must be one creative dude, right? I've got 10 tumors in my body at the age of 35. Right? So just to reflect, you know, the environment we're in, the thoughts we have, the feelings we have, the food we eat, the quality of our sleep, the relationships. And when I say relationships, just think about it. You ask the Surgeon General in the United States, where some of us are from, what is the opposite of health? And most people, pretty much even I, had no clue what he would say. And he actually said isolation, right? Because even when you're in jail, what's the worst they do? They put you in solitary confinement. Because once they cut off human connection, that's when you start to nosedive, right? So so talking about all this succession planning and estate planning and tax planning and all this investments and all of that, let's touch on what Alan talked about is happiness, quote unquote, which we prefer to use the word fulfillment, which he used as well, right? And are we really going towards what we want to achieve, and are we looking at things overall? Because we're in a room full of very successful people with incredible aspirations. Last night we talked about philanthropy and all that. So you want to play really hard. Now, in order to play ball, you need to have this body, which is the most sophisticated system on earth, to be able to support the process. You need to be able to give, but you can't give what you don't have. And that's what I did. I was actually giving on borrowed time. Right? So just to give you a little descriptive, right? So I would have 5 rounds of chemo in a row, unlike most people who have 1 every 3 weeks. I would lose 5 kilos in that 5 days. Most of the days I would have a cap full, the cap that's on your little bottle of water, just put on my lips. Then I would come back and I would spend 1 week not being able to taste my food. And therefore I would have to imagine the food to eat in order to maintain my weight. And the last week, I would be able to taste my food, I would eat, gain 5 kilos, so that I then could go back and do the same exercise again. Now, just imagine, when I did come home, after losing 5 kilos and being in a horrific state, I would actually get on my knees, put my head on my spouse's lap, and wail like a child. And I would say, please promise me not to take me back. And she obviously would sit in silence, because her mother died at 40 years old of ovarian cancer, and when she was 20, and now she's sitting with a 35-year-old who she happened to get married to, who's told he's going to drop dead while she's 27. Now, what kept me going, and this is something I just sent my kids a couple days ago, a photo of them when they were 1 and 3 is when I was diagnosed, and I said, this is why I was able to survive cancer. You are my why. And I tell you, most of the time we think that it would be okay to say goodbye. When I had my PET CTs, I would meditate in the tunnel that I was in, and I would visualize saying goodbye to my family. I would, painfully be able to do that for my parents, my brother, my cousin brother, even my spouse. But even after more than 10 attempts, I was never able to visualize saying goodbye to my children. It was just not possible. And I pray to God that you're never put in that position. So I want you to just reflect back that I'm not here to scare you. I'm just here to tell you that all these elements I talked about, right? Your medical state, how you're eating and drinking, which I know, it's been quite an adventure for many of you in the room, especially in this culture. And the lack or actually a movement that you do every day, the quality and quantity of your sleep. Most of us used to think we were very cool when we slept 4 or 5 hours a day. But let me tell you, with no rest and recovery, no matter what you eat, what you drink, and how much movement you do, your body's not able to restore itself, right? And then really think about what's going on in this head. Am I thinking positive thoughts, negative thoughts? Am I consistently worried? I mean, just think about yourself since morning. How many times have you touched your phone? How many times have you actually been able to be present and focused with the people out here who've been spending so much time and energy to prepare for today, right? And then, of course, lastly, the relational well-being, right? How am I doing in terms of my relationship with myself, with my loved ones, and the community at large, right? So really sit down, project yourself going forward at 93, 95, which obviously in this room is at least 45 to 50 years from now, and see, am I really in the direction I want to be? Am I going to be able to achieve the dreams that I want to achieve? Or am I going to shortchange myself like I did and had an abrupt change that forced me to completely do a U-turn and fortunately be alive today? Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your personal stories with us. 那在我们这个财富治理的过程当中，往往大家最关心的就是积累了多少个零，但那个健康永远是之前的这个1，所以这身体健康和我们情绪健康是至关重要的。那也为了大家所有的健康， 那我们今天上午的峰会呢，倒是告一个段落。我们在1楼的这个乐亭自助餐厅呢，为大家准备了午餐。那么下午的峰会呢，我们2点钟开始，还会有更多的重量级嘉宾的精彩演讲在等候各位。那么与此同时呢，如果您下午没有办法继续参会的话呢，请麻烦您将我们这个同声传音的设备交还给我们的登记处。如果您要继续参会的话呢，请保管好我们的同声传译的设备。感谢大家，我们午休后再见。So it's now lunch, prepared lunch for you on level 1, and we reconvene at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you won't be joining us this afternoon, please return your interpreting device to our registration desk. If you will be joining us, please look after your device. Thank you so much. I'll see you at 2.